So welcome to the Debit Friday. My name is Michael Olschimke. I'm the CEO of Scalefree. I'm running, or we're having the session here every Friday, 11 o'clock Central European Standard Time, German time, to allow you, the audience, to ask questions about Data Vault 2.0, data-driven applications, data mining, cloud computing, MP clusters, whatever you like, essentially. You can essentially use the chat here in the client. You can use the Q&A function in the client to raise live questions if you want. You can also raise your hand virtually, and I'll give you voice, so you can ask your questions in live. And I'll show you after today's session a form where you can also submit your questions, and then we'll answer them essentially in one of the next sessions. And yes, we're running a little bit low at the moment, so I have a few questions left, but it's summer break, so if you have any questions, shoot them, right? Now is the time to get them answered relatively close by. And if we receive multiple questions, I would be cherry picking. If we would receive no questions at all, I would talk about the cluster, but we have questions, so that's the good news. Because I didn't make much progress on it because of all these side projects I'm working on and so on. All right. Okay, so let's see. Let's take a look at today's question. And that is a extension to last week's question. So it's from the same person in the same batch, essentially. So this is about a virtualized load end date and the SQL optimizer again. So we had a discussion last week, essentially, on the joint elimination SQL server. So check out the recording on your favorite video platform. And this one here is in the same context, at least. So they join dictionaries on the satellites. So they have essentially reference tables. Not 100% sure how they look like. Maybe reference flat and white reference tables, or reference hubs and reference satellites. That's a more modern design these days. And they have essentially code attributes on the same satellites to a ref table. Okay. As we don't have a pit table for references, we have to join to the reference satellite entries as per below, and this activity prohibits join elimination. Problem is that they have a virtualized load end date. So they have a so they have a reference satellite, that's for sure. They have a reference satellite, which is essentially a standard satellite if you want in Data Vault, but instead of having a hash key and load date as a primary key, because the reference satellite is attached to the reference hub, which doesn't contain any hash keys, only has the code as the primary key if you want. The reference satellite refers to the code and the load date. That's the primary key, essentially. Which means that you still need to have a load end date. So you have to calculate one virtually, so you can join. And that's what they do here. They essentially in this view, they calculate the load end date virtually. That's the basic idea. And then they want to find out the delta, which is the most relevant delta for a snapshot date, essentially. So they look for the delta where the snapshot date is between the load date and the load end date. That's as usual. And typically when you have performance problems, you would then add a PIT table to your hub, standard data vault hub, and that turns this complex join condition here into an equi-join condition, because you only join on the standard hub, hash key equals hash key, and load date from the pit table to the load date from the satellite. That gives you the inner join, equi-join capability. But it's not possible here. They don't have as this person wrote, they don't have a pit table on reference hubs, which is also an overkill, to be honest. All right, but they have, so that means they have to left join the satellite, and they have essentially a complex join condition, and that's a performance issue. And they can't solve this because any index on the table, I'll double check it was the person, any index on the underlying table would not be picked up because of the window function involved when calculating the load end date in SQL Server. So a couple of ideas now. One idea would be to have essentially what this person calls a snapshotted satellite. What he means, or what he refers to, is essentially quite simple. In the raw data vault, a satellite has a primary key typically but at least a standard satellite has always a primary key of a hash key from the parent, hub or link, and the load date. In the business vault, there's also a concept where we use, instead of the load date as the timeline in the primary key of the compute satellite, which is valid, we could also use the snapshot date. And we had a discussion on this before in one of the webinars. The idea or the issue is, or the concept is, that somewhere in the business vault, there happens a switch from the incoming deltas from this data source based on the load date, which are identified on the granularity of the load date, and the outgoing information in the information mart, which is essentially based on the snapshot timeline. So somewhere in the business vault, there's a switch. And we can implement, the switch is mostly in the pit and bridge tables. When you add them, you have to essentially on a regular basis add the snapshots to the pit and bridge tables, and that implements the switch. Well, it's a bit more gray. So we can also have satellites where you have the primary key for load date and snapshot. The hash key and snapshot date. That's the primary key of the compute satellite, and that gives you the granularity of the outgoing information. So that's the basic idea. Without going into too much details, there's some recordings on this, and we also have a training on information delivery. We discuss this in much more detail, essentially. And some of the tool vendors picked up this idea, and like Data Vault Builder, for example, which is a partner of Scalefree, and they apparently do this like this. So yes, so what do you think about this approach? Well, I taught it, so I should like it, and I like it, to be honest. It's actually very efficient of delivering information when you have different granularities involved, either on the incoming deltas, on the raw data, or on the outgoing information. That's why we do it. It's super efficient and makes the business logic much more easy to implement, essentially. So yes. Now, are there other alternatives? So first, let's talk about this alternative. What we would do now, if you stick to this snapshot satellite, you would then essentially create you have a reference hub for your codes. You have a reference satellite in the raw data vault, which captures the incoming descriptions for your codes based on the load date. So whenever you receive a new delta from a source that changes the description of your country codes or currency codes and so on, you capture this in the reference satellite in the raw data vault based on the load date. That makes it easy. And then you have a computed reference satellite in the business vault, where you then change the timeline from load date based to snapshot date based. You make the decision which description should be used for country or currencies day by day, reporting day by day. And you would synchronize the snapshot dates with the snapshot dates in the PRT table. So you typically have a control table for your PRT tables, control table that defines your snapshot dates available in your PRT tables, and I would synchronize it with that control table as well. So that's the standard approach. Now, you could, and this stems from a discussion, you could limit the reference satellite to only the latest delta. The latest snapshot. That would work, but it would limit your reference satellite to a type 1, and not type 0, but type 1 dimension, essentially. Type 2 would be a problem, because then you need to have the description for every change, or every reporting date at least, in your satellite. The only problem is, when you do that, you have to maintain this table a lot, right? So you have to delete all the old records all the time, but that's fine. So you partition the reference satellite, the computed reference satellite, by the snapshot date, and drop them again and again. And you can rebuild them, right? So it would work. Auditing-wise, it works because we're not modifying the raw data. We're modifying the results of the business we're deleting all the results from the computed reference satellite. And if the audit comes in and says, well, give me the report from 5 days ago, we can rebuild this easily. So it would work. It's just a bit more maintenance. That's the only thing. And we do the same for PRT tables, by the way. We drop the old snapshot dates on a regular basis. After 90 days, we drop them from the PRT tables as well to save storage. Now, what are the other alternatives? First of all, what if you... Well, I would first of all, maybe it helps. Consider having not many of these reference hubs and satellites, but having only one that captures all the reference data for different domains, as long as the structure is the same. So let's say engine types, contract types, and so on. I bet that 80% of your reference data always has the same structure. You have the code, you have a caption, abbreviation, wiki URL, icon, default color for reporting, and so on. The standard structure. 80% of your reference data has the same structure. So consider what it's called code and description table in a training. Code and description, even though every reference table has code and description, in my opinion, but that's what it is. So this code and description table is essentially, it includes a group code in the primary key. So it's the code, the local code for your engine types, but then it has also a group code engine types, or ET, I don't know. And this combination is unique for your code. So you can essentially use this table to capture all the reference data having the same structure. I'm saying that because there's a chance that the table is already in memory, so it wouldn't have to pick up all the time. I would give it a shot, essentially. And it simplifies your data model as well, especially on the raw data vault, but also on the business vault. It just simplifies your data model, because we have customers where they have hundreds of code tables, and we capture 80% of their code tables with one table, essentially, right? Makes it simpler. So that's the first thing I want to discuss. The next thing is you could have a PRT table on a reference hub, but it sounds like an overkill. It's most certainly an overkill. It's number one. But what if you use the reference codes in some dimension? Let's say a customer dimension, right? You have a country for the customer, and you want to know. Well, you have the country code for the customer in the address, and you want to know what's the country name or the sort order for the countries, and so on. You could add the reference satellite into the PRT table of the customer hub, for example. Problem is, the PRT table becomes wider because you're adding a new satellite, right? And there's redundancy in there because you have many customers living in, let's say, Poland or Germany or France or England and so on. So you're referring to the same delta again and again, but would solve the problem as well, right? You could also add the reference data itself, the country name or the sort order that you rely on, essentially. You could add that reference data into the PRT table. Works as well. So it depends a bit on the number of reference tables you have to refer to, right? And the number of attributes you need might work or not. So especially when we partition the PRT table by these codes, then we have to do it anyway. But you could extend the PRT table essentially. That's essentially what comes to my mind immediately, at least. You could also materialize those. The thing is, reference tables don't contain personal data typically, right? So what I have a problem when you materialize dimensions or some let's say compute satellites in the business world. When you materialize them, it's fine to some extent, but materialization also means when you have to delete personal data, that becomes more complicated. If think about this, if you just delete the data in the raw data vault satellite and everything downstream is virtualized, problem solved, right? Makes it much easier. That's what I'm saying. So, but here you could materialize, for example, at least the snapshotted satellite. You would materialize this anyway. Yeah, I would. Yeah, I most probably I would deal with the PRT table of the customer hub of the hub that or the dimension that refers to the reference data. That's where I would apply my tricks, where I would join the delta to that table essentially. Think about, yeah, seriously, it's really, you're looking at a 2 columns more, assuming you're only joining a couple of satellites, right? 2 columns more per satellite, where you have only the code, which is it's not a hash value, so it's much shorter, right? Fixed length, 4 characters, whatever, 3 characters for a country or currency, and then you have the 8 bytes for the timestamp. So that's what you have to add to the PRT table on the width, essentially. Or the other alternative, the latest snapshot only, but then again you're limiting yourself to the current the type 1 dimensions essentially. That's the idea. Okay, yeah, I think that's the most efficient ideas that come to my mind. Let's say that. Cool. Okay, so if you have a question like this, sorry, my laptop is slow at the moment. So use this form here, sfr.ee/dvfriday. That's where you can get a form where you can essentially type in your question, upload pictures of a whiteboard maybe or a small model essentially. Make sure it fits on HD, right? So because it's better for the sessions. And then we also have other webinars, one on Warescape, one on DBT, and you find them at scalefree.to/webinars. Correct? I believe so. And if you can't wait until my laptop is doing something here, until next Friday, 11 o'clock again. Check out the Data Vault Innovators community, where we essentially, it's a forum-style community where you can ask questions as well, and our Scalefree guys and the Ignition Data guys, they jump on your question and answer it as quick as possible, much quicker than I. So we have to wait for a week essentially for the next Data Vault Friday to get me on the line here. All right, cool. So thanks for joining. Enjoy the weekend. It's getting very sunny here in Germany, so or northern Germany. So we'll enjoy it. Thank you guys, and see you next Friday.